Welcome to Bold Guy DIY. In this video, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know in order to change out T8 fluorescent bulbs and put in some LED ones instead. We're all familiar with the fluorescent lighting that's found in most office spaces throughout North America. I don't know about the rest of the world. I haven't been to office buildings in many other places, but we're familiar with those 4-foot T8 lamps that we see everywhere. If you've ever had to replace them, or if you've seen them in stores or in an exposed fixture that has the cover off, you'll know that they're 4-foot tubes that have a gas inside that when that gas is energized, it causes it to give off light. Now, these are really popular because they were easily manufactured and they were a great solution for a lot of years. However, with the increase in LED technology and the availability of the new lighting tubes, there's an opportunity to save some money when it comes to energy consumption and also remove some of the costs of maintenance over the lifetime of the fixture. If you're not sure why you should make the switch from fluorescent to LED, there's a couple things to keep in mind. For one, a standard 4-foot T8 bulb uses about 32 watts of electricity, and you multiply that 32 watts by the number of bulbs in the fixture. So on a typical 4-lamp fixture, you would see 4 times 32, which is 128 watts being consumed at one time. Also, on top of the actual bulb usage, there is also usage because of the losses that occur in the ballast. Now, if you're not sure what a ballast is, it's a voltage conversion from the standard 120 or other voltage that you might be supplying the fixture with to the voltage that's required in order to cause that gas inside the fluorescent tubes to actually give off light. If you were to just put your regular 120 volts to it, you're not going to get any light at all. It really requires a much higher voltage. And that's really the role of the ballast, is to just take that incoming voltage, ramp it up, and produce an arc inside that lamp that'll cause it to light and stay lit for the course of the time that you need it. So all in all, a 4-lamp T8 fixture with the bulb and the ballast is probably using more like 150 watts. Now, if you were to replace those bulbs with LED fluorescent tubes instead, you're going to cut that energy consumption almost in half, from 32 watts per bulb down to 17, and it's going to mean that each bulb requires a lot less electricity, and overall the fixture itself uses a lot less electricity. Now, we're not talking about huge amounts of watts, but when you multiply that across how many hundreds of these fixtures that can exist in a large commercial space, it does add up over time. The second major factor is the lifespan of an LED tube compared to a fluorescent tube. You might have seen fluorescent tubes that are still going strong many years later, but the usual approximation for fluorescent lighting that's being used regularly is that after about 5 years, you're definitely going to want to have replaced them. That's because the quality of the light dissipates over time and they become a little dimmer over the course of that. Depending on the usage and the bulb technology and all of those things, you might see different results, but typically you're going to see a reduction in brightness of up to 40% even just in those 5 years. The other problem is that the ballast itself has a lifespan. The old ballast with a heavy transformer in it lasted a lot shorter time because there was more heat created, and while these electronic ballasts that are used in T8 bulbs today have a longer lifespan, they're still prone to failure in some cases. 5 years is not supposed to be the lifespan of them. I've heard they're supposed to last at least 10, but in my experience, I've had a lot of them that need to be replaced after 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, just depending on the environment. Depending on the LED tube technology that you use, you may still require the ballast, or you might be able to bypass it completely and never have to replace another one. So let's talk about the difference between the LED tubes that are available. The first major difference that I want to mention is simply the difference between instant fit or retrofit bulbs and ballast free or bypass bulbs. Now, what does that mean? The instant fit or retrofit means that you simply pull down that existing bulb and pop in a new bulb that's LED and that's meant to work with the ballast that's already in place. It's called instant fit because you don't need to change any of the wiring. You simply replace the bulbs with the new LED tubes and they'll work just like they did before. The good news is that these bulbs are cheaper than the ballast free model and they don't require any changes to the wiring, so it's a pretty quick replacement. However, the main disadvantage to them is that they require the ballast to be in place. And so when that ballast does eventually fail, you're going to have a situation where you need to replace the ballast and possibly the bulbs with it. Now, that might not seem like a big deal if you have a newer installation or you don't have that many to do, but when you think about a situation where over a period of time you have ballasts that always need to be replaced, the combined cost of the ballast and the bulbs is more than the second option, which is called ballast-free or bypass bulbs. The ballast-free or bypass bulbs pretty much live up to their name, and that is that you don't require the ballast, and in order to make them work in an existing fluorescent fixture, you have to bypass the ballast that's there. So basically you're going to cut the ballast out of the fixture and instead connect the line voltage that was supplied to the fixture directly to the wires that supply power to the fluorescent tubes. That means that instead of the tubes getting the high voltage that was required from the ballast to ignite the gas inside the fluorescent tube, when it comes to the LEDs, they're going to be able to produce light with just the standard 120 volts that you find in most places. Though the individual bulbs of a ballast-free or bypass bulb are more expensive, when you consider the fact that you never have to replace a ballast, the total cost per light fixture is less, although it does take a little bit of time to swap it over. In most cases, if the line voltage being supplied to that fixture is only 120 volts or even up to 277 volts, as is common in some other three-phase systems, it's definitely going to be worthwhile to use the ballast-free bulbs. If you're in a situation where you're pulling off a 347 volt phase from a 600 volt supply, then it's going to make sense to leave the existing ballasts in place because the bulbs themselves are not rated for that voltage and they were going to fail and possibly even fail spectacularly, letting the smoke out. The bottom line, as I said, if you're going to replace on a 120 volt system, you're going to want the ballast-free bulbs most of the time. You make the little conversion that you need, and then you never have to worry about swapping in the right bulbs ever again. You might wonder about the different voltages being applied to the LEDs, but basically inside those tubes, the conversion's being made because LEDs themselves actually require very little voltage, usually in like the 3 to 5 volt range, and anything above that requires resistors in order to prevent them from burning out. So inside of the bulb technology, it's going to be changing the voltage anyway. So pick the bulb that works for the ballast-free or existing ballast situation that you want to pursue, and it'll be perfectly matched for the voltage in those situations. In order to convert an existing T8 fixture to work with the new ballast-free bulbs, you simply need to turn off the power to the fixture, remove the covers, and have access to the ballast and the connections. You're going to remove the connection from the line incoming power, both the line or hot and the neutral or identified conductor, and so that the ballast itself is no longer hooked up to the power, and that's your fail-safe, because the next thing you're going to do is snip the existing wires close to the ballast, the yellow, blue, and red, so that you have the most amount of wire to work with as you convert it to the line voltage instead of the ballast voltage. Next, you're going to strip the ends of those wires, blue, red, and yellow, and you're going to prepare them so that you can twist them together. When you've got those wires twisted together, you're going to connect them to the hot or live wire coming into the fixture. On the other side, you're going to have the yellow wires, and after you've stripped them and twisted them together, you're going to join them to the neutral or identified side of the incoming power. You'll also want to make sure that the ground or bonding conductor is secured to the metal frame of the fixture, and that's just there for safety. With that brief amount of work done, and for me it takes less than 5 minutes, you're ready to install the bulbs again. So you put the cover back on, you insert the bulbs and turn it back on, and now you're supplying 120 volts or 277 in some cases to the bulbs. They should immediately light up and give you that bright, fresh light that doesn't degrade over time. Now you've got bulbs that are going to last much longer, remain as bright as can be, and they're ready to go for replacement if they do ever fail with another ballast-free bulb in the future. The vendor that I bought my bulbs from included stickers that are supposed to be applied inside the fixture to let a future electrician or person changing bulbs know that these are supposed to be bypass bulbs instead of standard ones that work with the ballast, and to let them know that the ballast has been removed from the circuit. Although the lower 120 or 277 volt supply is not going to ignite bulbs that were rated for a much higher voltage with the ballast, it's still good practice to let future technicians know what they need to do in order to stay safe. There's one more consideration that you need to make when replacing bulbs, and that's what color temperature you're going to use. If you haven't yet seen my video on why we use color temperature and how it works, then check that out. I've included the link above. And to give you the short version of it, when it comes to buying LEDs or fluorescent tubes, they typically come in a 3000 or 3300 K range, a 4000, 4100, 44, somewhere in their range. That's a cooler white, and then the 5000 K, which is the daylight. My personal preference, I love the daylight, and that's what I put in every chance that I get. I think that's all you need to know in order to make the correct decision when replacing fluorescent tubes with LEDs. But if I missed something, please let me know in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer any other questions that you have. If you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and check back every week as I post a new video every Saturday morning. If you'd like to contact me, my email is in the description below, and if you want, you can follow me on Twitter. Thanks to all my recent subscribers. It's been a lot of fun watching the channel grow, and I can't wait to see what lays ahead in the future. Until next time, when it comes to brightening up your life, don't be afraid to be bolder.